Marcus Chen stood frozen in the cargo bay as three striped tails twitched nervously from behind his legs, completely visible to the armed Vrakan warriors stomping toward him. The predator cubs thought they were hidden. They weren't. Marcus could feel their tiny, clawed hands gripping his jacket, their warm breath, quick and panicked, against the back of his knees. And he thought of all the ways to die in this galaxy. Becoming a shield for the children of the universe's most feared apex predators wasn't how he'd imagined it ending. The lead warriors, eyes 6 of them, arranged in 2 rows across a face that looked like evolution had designed it specifically for nightmares, locked onto those 3 betraying tails. And Marcus watched the creature's expression shift from rage to something he couldn't quite identify. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief. Behind the warriors, Lyra stepped forward, her silver hair catching the harsh bay lights. Those distinctly pointed ears, the only thing marking her as non-human. And Marcus saw fear flash across her normally composed features. "Captain Drevik," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor. Marcus knew she was fighting. "I can explain why the human has your offspring." The moment hung there, suspended like a drop of water clinging to a leaf, before the fall. And Marcus realized that the next words out of anyone's mouth would determine whether he walked out of this cargo bay or was carried out in pieces. 48 hours earlier, Marcus had been having a perfectly normal, terrible day. The diplomatic station Frontier's Hope orbited a neutral moon between 5 different territorial claims, which meant it was either the galaxy's best example of cooperation or a powder keg wrapped in treaties and polite lies. Marcus, xenobiologist and unwilling diplomat after his predecessor, had retired following what was officially called a cultural misunderstanding, and unofficially called the incident with the ceremonial soup, had been trying to mediate a trade dispute between a Zelthi merchant and a human shipping company. The Zelthi had 17 different words for delivery and thought they'd negotiated for the deluxe service. The humans thought they'd agreed to standard shipping. Somehow, Marcus was supposed to fix this with science and a smile. He was failing at both when Lyra found him in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars like they might rearrange themselves into an answer key for his life. "You look like a man contemplating the void," Lyra said, settling onto the bench beside him with that peculiar grace her people had. Like gravity was a suggestion rather than a law. Marcus had known her for 6 months, ever since she'd arrived as the Seraphim Collective's cultural liaison, and he still wasn't used to how her presence made his heart do complicated things in his chest. The Seraphim were humanoid, almost eerily so, except for those elegant, pointed ears and the faint luminescent quality their skin had in certain lights, like they'd swallowed starlight and it was trying to escape. Lyra's eyes were the color of Earth's oceans, which Marcus hadn't seen in person for 3 years, but remembered with the clarity of homesickness. "The void doesn't judge me for my failures," Marcus replied, managing a tired smile. "Unlike the 17 messages waiting in my inbox from the Zelthi Merchant Council," Lyra laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of crystal. "I have a proposition that might rescue you from maritime law and vocabulary lessons." She pulled out a datapad, her expression shifting to something more serious. "The Vrakan delegation is arriving tomorrow. They're bringing younglings. The station's primary educator just quit something about not wanting to be responsible for the offspring of a species that considers ritual combat a form of greeting. We need someone to supervise the cubs for the duration of the negotiations. Someone calm. Someone who won't panic." Marcus blinked. The Vrakan, the apex predators of the Korvax sector. A species so formidable that their word for peace was the same as their word for strategic pause before next battle. They stood 8 feet tall, had more teeth than seemed architecturally necessary. And their cubs were supposedly born with hunting instincts that put Earth's big cats to shame. "You want me to babysit predator cubs," Marcus said slowly. "You, Lyra, want me, a human who once got nervous around a particularly aggressive house cat, to watch the children of the galaxy's most dangerous species." Lyra's smile was soft, understanding, and completely merciless. "I want you to do it, because you're the only person on this station who sees people before you see species. You wrote a paper on Vrakan parental bonding rituals, Marcus. You called them surprisingly tender for a warrior culture. You understand them." She leaned closer, and Marcus caught the scent of whatever the Seraphim used that smelled like rain and electricity. "Besides, the alternative is going back to the shipping dispute." Marcus thought about 17 more emails. About the Zelthi merchant's disappointed face flaps, How many cubs are we talking about? 3. Ages 4 to 6 in standard years. Their names are Crush, Mira, and Little Toth. Lyra's expression softened. Their father is Captain Drevik, the delegation leader. His mate died last year in a territorial defense. He's trying to raise them alone while maintaining his position. This negotiation is crucial for him, for all of them. And there it was, the thing that always got Marcus into trouble. The story behind the species, the people behind the reputation. When do they arrive? He asked, and Lyra's smile could have lit the observation deck without the stars. The cubs arrived like a natural disaster in small packages. Crush, the oldest at 6, had her mother's stripping pattern bold black marks against deep amber fur and her father's intensity. She studied Marcus with all 6 eyes, nostrils flaring as she scented him, and he could see her categorizing him into whatever framework a young Vracan used to understand the universe. Mira, 5 years old, was stockier, built like she was already preparing for the warrior trials her culture would expect. But she clutched a small object to her chest, something worn and soft that Marcus recognized as a comfort item, and he felt his nervousness ease slightly. Toth, the baby at 4, barely came up to Marcus's knee, and had the proportionally large eyes of the very young across most species. The little cub's tail, striped in lighter colors than his siblings, swished back and forth with barely contained energy. Captain Drevik stood behind them, a mountain of muscle and controlled violence, his scarred face unreadable. "You are the human who will guard my offspring," he said, voice like grinding stone. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, proud that his voice stayed steady. "I'll keep them safe and engaged during the negotiations." One of Drevik's eyes, the upper left, twitched. "The station director said you were brave or foolish. I have not determined which." He looked down at his cubs, and Marcus saw something shift in that terrifying face. Softness, love. "They have been difficult since their mother's crossing. Mira has nightmares. Toth bites when frightened." Crush, he paused, and one massive hand touched the oldest cub's head with surprising gentleness. Crush tries to be fierce before she is ready. She thinks she must protect her siblings, as her mother would have. The captain's eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory focus. "Keep them safe, human. Let them be cubs for a while longer." Marcus spent the first 4 hours proving the universe had a sense of humor. The cubs tested him immediately. Crush tried to establish dominance by growling, which was adorable and slightly concerning. Mira refused to participate in any activity unless her siblings went first, protective instinct warring with natural shyness. Toth bit him twice, little needle teeth finding the gap in his sleeve, though the bites were more exploratory than aggressive. Marcus didn't react with fear or anger. Instead, he sat down on the floor of the station's rec room he'd converted into a temporary care space, made himself smaller and less threatening, and started talking. He told them about Earth, about creatures called lions and tigers, predators from his world that stalked and hunted and cared fiercely for their young. He showed them videos of big cats playing, fighting, protecting. He watched Krez's eyes widen with interest, saw Mira relax incrementally, noticed Toth creeping closer with kitten-like curiosity. "Your mother was a warrior," Marcus said quietly, pulling up the public records Lyra had provided with Drevik's permission. The image showed a Vracan female in ceremonial armor, powerful and scarred, and unmistakably proud. "But she was also your mother." "Both things were true. You can honor her by being fierce, yes, and by letting others help you. Strength isn't always about standing alone." Krez's ears flattened, a sign of emotional vulnerability in Vracan body language. "Father stands alone," she said, voice higher than her attempt at fierceness suggested. "Father has to be strong for everyone. Your father has an entire delegation supporting him," Marcus countered gently. "And he trusted me with you, which means he knows when to accept help. That's wisdom, Crush. That's a different kind of strength." Something shifted after that. The cubs still tested boundaries. Vracan young were hardwired to understand hierarchy and rules through challenge, but they began to trust. Mira showed Marcus her comfort object, a piece of cloth that had belonged to her mother, still carrying a scent that made the cub's eyes close in remembered safety. Toth stopped biting and started following Marcus everywhere, tiny clawed feet pattering on the deck plates. Crush asked questions, dozens of them, about Earth and humans, and why Marcus wasn't afraid of them when everyone else on the station gave them wide berths. Lyra visited each day, ostensibly to check on diplomatic protocols, but really, Marcus suspected, to see him. She brought treats compatible with Bracken digestion, played games that helped the cubs practice their developing motor skills, and stayed after the cubs went to their rest period to talk with Marcus in the quiet hours. "You're good with them," she said on the third evening, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. The contact sent warmth through Marcus's chest, a feeling he'd been trying not to examine too closely. "They're good kids," Marcus replied, watching through the observation window as the cubs slept in a pile, instinctively seeking each other's warmth and security. "They're grieving and trying to understand a universe that took their mother. I can't fix that, but I can give them a safe place to just be young for a while." Lyra turned to look at him, her luminescent skin glowing softly in the dim lighting. "Do you know why I recommended you for this?" Marcus shook his head. "Because 6 months ago, when I first arrived, I was terrified. The Seraphim sent me here as a test first major solo assignment. I was supposed to be poised and perfect and represent my people flawlessly. I was falling apart." She smiled, the expression bittersweet. "You found me crying in the hydroponics bay. Do you remember what you said?" Marcus did remember. He'd stumbled upon her, hidden among the earth plants he cultivated as a hobby, tears tracking down her luminescent cheeks, looking lost and young, and so very far from home. "I said that being scared doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're trying something that matters." "You saw me," Lyra said softly. "Not the diplomatic liaison, not the alien, just me, struggling and doing my best." "You do that, Marcus. You see people. That's why the cubs trust you." "That's why she stopped, bit her lip, and Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. "That's why you what?" he asked, barely breathing. Lyra's eyes met his, ocean deep and full of something that made the universe feel smaller and more significant all at once. "That's why I think you're remarkable," she said, and her hand found his in the space between them. Her fingers were warm, her palm smooth, except for the curious ridges along the outside edge that were unique to her species. Marcus squeezed gently, words tangling in his throat, all the feelings he'd been carefully containing for months, threatening to spill out. Before he could speak, an alarm shrieked through the station. Red emergency lights painting everything in blood-colored shadows. The station's communication system crackled to life with the director's strained voice. "All personnel, we have unauthorized ships approaching. They're broadcasting Bracken military codes but not responding to hails. Security teams to positions. Diplomatic delegations to safe rooms immediately." Marcus and Lyra moved without discussion, their hands separating as training took over. The cubs woke instantly, as all predator young do, going from sleep to alert in heartbeats. Kresh positioned herself in front of her siblings, ears forward, lips pulled back from developing fangs. "What's happening?" she demanded, looking to Marcus. "Probably nothing," Marcus said, forcing calm into his voice. "But we're going to play a game called Follow the Protocol. We're going to go to the cargo bay's emergency shelter, and we're going to stay very quiet until someone comes to get us. Can you do that?" The cubs knew danger when they sensed it. They nodded, Mira gathering Toth close, while Kresh maintained her protective stance. Lyra pulled up a station map on her datapad. "The nearest shelter is through Section 7. We need to move now." They made it halfway before the station shuddered, artificial gravity wavering for a sickening moment. The cubs whimpered, despite their predator heritage, and Marcus saw their training and instincts were with fear. They were children, he reminded himself. Dangerous or not, they were children in a crisis. "We're okay," he said firmly, keeping his voice steady. "Stay close to me. Lyra's going to lead. We're going to be fine." They navigated through corridors strobing with emergency lights, past security teams running toward docking ports, around panicked station personnel heading for shelters. Marcus kept the cubs between him and Lyra, a protective formation that came instinctively. They reached the cargo bay only to find chaos. The emergency shelter's door was malfunctioning, sparking and sealed shut. Other evacuees were being redirected to secondary locations, but those were on the other side of the station. Through the viewport, Marcus could see ships docking Bracken vessels, but marked with insignia he didn't recognize. "Renegades," Lyra breathed, her face pale. Captain Drevik mentioned there was a splinter faction that opposed the negotiations. "They think peace makes the Bracken weak." "Marcus, if they find the cubs here, they might." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Political leverage, hostages, a captain forced to choose between his children and his mission. Marcus's mind raced through options, each more impossible than the last. The cargo bay had dozens of crates and containers, supplies for the station's various species and purposes. Hiding places. Here, he said, spotting a gap between two large containers of Zelthy grain shipments. The three of you, get behind these crates. Don't make a sound. Don't come out until your father or someone you absolutely know is safe comes to get you. Krez's eyes widened. You're staying out here? To protect us? I'm staying to make sure anyone who comes looking doesn't think to search, Marcus corrected, though they both knew what he was really doing. Your father trusted me to keep you safe. I'm keeping that promise. Mira grabbed his hand with her small, clawed one, the gesture achingly similar to how Lyra had held him just minutes before. But you could hide too, the cub said, voice small. If something happens to you because of us, Marcus knelt down, meeting all 6 of her eyes with his two. Nothing is going to happen to me. And nothing is going to happen to you. That's not a hope, Mira. That's a fact. Now hide, quickly. The cubs squeezed into the gap between containers, and Marcus positioned himself near the cargo bay's main terminal, calling up inventory screens to look busy and legitimate. Lyra stood beside him, her hand brushing against his back in silent support and shared fear. You don't have to stay, Marcus whispered. You're a diplomat. You have immunity. They won't if you're staying. I'm staying, Lyra interrupted, her voice carrying the same immovable quality as a mountain. We protect them together, Marcus. That's not negotiable. The cargo bay doors hissed open. 6 Bracken warriors entered, bigger than Captain Drevik, their armor marked with the scratched-out insignia of the official military. Renegades, just as Lyra had feared. The leader's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile or a threat display. Human, the warrior said, voice dripping contempt. Where is Captain Drevik's spawn? We know they're housed in this sector. Marcus forced his expression into confusion. I'm just a cargo manager. I don't know anything about kids. There's a lot of people evacuating. The warrior moved faster than something that large should be able to, closing the distance and grabbing Marcus by the front of his jacket. Do not lie to me, soft skin. The traitor captain's offspring are here. You will tell me where, or you will learn why the Bracken are feared. Behind the containers, Marcus heard the tiniest sound. A whimper, quickly stifled. And then, to his absolute horror and unwilling affection, he saw them. 3 striped tails, sticking out from behind the crates at different heights, twitching with fear, and the cubs' instinctive attempt to make themselves smaller. They'd pressed as far back as they could go, but they'd forgotten the most visible part of themselves. The warrior holding Marcus went still. His eyes tracked to those betraying tails. The other renegades saw them too, weapons rising. Marcus felt time compress into something thick and slow. He saw Lyra's hand moving toward the emergency alarm, saw the warriors beginning to advance, saw those 3 tails trembling, 3 cubs who'd trusted him, now exposed and terrified. Something ignited in Marcus's chest, something that had nothing to do with logic or survival instinct. Touch them, he said, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute, and you'll have to go through me. The warrior, holding him, laughed, actually laughed. A human? Threatening Bracken warriors? You're barely worthy of being prey. Marcus didn't back down. He thought about Crush trying to be fierce before she was ready, about Mira sharing her mother's cloth, about Toth's needle teeth bites turning into playful nips, about Captain Drevik's voice when he said let them be cubs for a while longer. I'm not threatening you, Marcus said quietly. I'm telling you what is. You want those cubs? You come through me. And I promise you, I will make it cost more than you're willing to pay. The warrior's grip tightened, claws pricking through fabric to skin, and Marcus saw his death in those alien eyes. Then Captain Drevik's voice, amplified and absolutely furious, boomed through the cargo bay's comm system. Kravix, release the human. Step away from my offspring, or I will show you why I command fleets while you hide in shadows and threaten children. The cargo bay doors exploded inward, and Captain Drevik entered with a full security contingent, both Bracken loyal warriors and station personnel. The captain was a storm of controlled violence, every line of his massive body promising destruction. The renegade leader Kravix released Marcus but didn't retreat. Your weakness has made you blind, Drevik. Negotiating with lesser species? Allowing your spawn to be tended by prey? You shame our people. I shame nothing, Drevik said, each word measured and deadly. I lead. I adapt. I ensure our people have a future beyond endless war. You? You cling to the past and hide behind kidnapping attempts because you have no actual power. His eyes found the three tails still visible behind the containers. My offspring, come here. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Crush emerged first, head high despite her fear, trying to be brave. Mira followed, clutching Toth, who buried his face in his sister's fur. They didn't run to their father, though. They moved to Marcus, pressing against his legs exactly as they had been hiding behind him, tiny hands gripping his jacket. Their tails, those betraying striped tails that had revealed them, curled around his calves in a gesture of trust and seeking protection. The entire cargo bay went silent. Kravix stared. Drevik's expression shifted through emotions Marcus couldn't name. Lyra's hand found Marcus's, squeezing hard. Marcus looked down at three young predators seeking safety from him, a human, a species the Vraken had historically considered weak. He felt their rapid heartbeats through his pants, their warm breath, their absolute faith that he would keep them safe. You see weakness? Marcus said, looking directly at Kravix. I see three brave kids who've lost their mother and are trying to make sense of a confusing universe. I see a father fighting for a better future for them. I see people, not categories. If that makes me pray in your eyes, then you've already lost what matters. Drevik moved then, crossing the bay in 3 massive strides. He actually knelt, bringing his terrifying face level with his cubs. My little ones, he said, voice gentler than Marcus had ever heard. You chose well. The human has honor. He has courage. These are qualities we value above all. His eyes lifted to Marcus. You stood between my offspring and warriors. You, who have no natural weapons, no armor, no reason beyond a promise to an alien father. One massive hand extended, clawed and scarred, and absolutely capable of crushing Marcus's entire skull. The Vraken do not forget debts. You have my oath, Marcus Chen, my protection, my respect, my friendship, if you will accept it from one who misjudged what strength truly means. Marcus took the offered hand, his small fingers disappearing into the captain's grip. I accept, he said simply. And your kids are pretty great. They're welcome in my care anytime. Kravix made a sound of disgust, but the fight had gone out of him. Station security was already moving in, restraining the renegades. The attempted kidnapping would have political consequences, legal repercussions, all the machinery of justice and diplomacy grinding forward. But in that moment, Marcus only cared about 3 cubs slowly relaxing their death grip on his legs. The crisis passed like a storm, moving on to trouble other horizons. The renegades were confined. The negotiations continued with renewed purpose. The attack had proven exactly why cooperation was necessary, why building bridges served all species better than maintaining walls. Captain Drevik became a vocal advocate for human Vraken cooperation, citing Marcus specifically in his formal addresses, which was both deeply honoring and slightly embarrassing. The cubs stayed with Marcus for the rest of the delegation's visit. Drevik requested it specifically. They trust you, the captain said during one of their evening conversations, watching through the window as the cubs played a game Lyra had taught them. Trust is not given easily by Vraken young. It must be earned through action. You earned it, Marcus. More than that, you've helped them heal in ways I could not. I am a warrior. I know how to teach fierceness. You've shown them it's acceptable to be gentle, to be young, to trust others with their safety. Marcus watched Crush letting Lyra braid colored strings into a bracelet, no longer feeling the need to prove her toughness every moment. Watched Mira laughing, actually laughing, as Toth tried to pounce on a light dot Marcus was controlling with a laser pointer. They're good kids, he said, the words becoming his mantra. They just needed someone to see that. The day the delegation left, the cubs didn't want to go. Toth wrapped himself around Marcus's leg and had to be gently pried off. Mira gave him her mother's cloth, the most precious thing she owned, which Marcus carefully gave back with the explanation that her mother would want her to keep it, but he would treasure the thought forever. Crush hugged him, fierce and quick, and whispered, "You're pack now. You're part of our pack, even if you're far away." Marcus's eyes burned with tears. He didn't try to hide. "You're part of mine too," he whispered back. Captain Drevik clasped his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "We will return," he promised. "This is not an ending, Marcus Chen. This is a beginning. For my people, for my cubs, for friendships that cross species and stars." After they left, the station felt too quiet. Marcus returned to his normal duties, mediating disputes and cataloging biological samples and writing reports. But everything felt different now, like he'd crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't go back to who he'd been before. Lyra found him in the observation deck 3 days later, staring at the stars again. But this time, he wasn't contemplating the void. He was thinking about striped tails sticking out from behind crates, about 3 cubs who'd forgotten to hide them because they were too focused on pressing close to someone they trusted, about a moment when everything could have gone horribly wrong, but didn't because people chose connection over conflict. "You're thinking loud enough. I can almost hear it," Lyra said, settling beside him in the spot that had become hers over months of conversations and shared moments. Marcus smiled. "I'm thinking about tails, and trust, and how sometimes the things we can't hide are what save us." Lyra nodded, understanding in the way she always seemed to understand him. The cubs couldn't hide their tails. They gave away their position. But that moment, Marcus, that moment when they chose to trust you, when they stayed with you instead of running to their father, that changed everything. Kravix and his warriors saw it. The entire delegation saw it. Vraken cubs, apex predator offspring, seeking protection from a human. It broke something in their assumptions about strength and weakness. She turned to face him fully, her luminescent skin glowing in the dim light, her pointed ears distinct and elegant. "You broke my assumptions too," she said softly. "When I first met you, I thought you were kind. I didn't realize you were brave. I didn't understand that kindness is a form of bravery, especially in a universe that often values hardness over heart." Marcus's breath caught. "Lyra, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I've spent 6 months watching you, seeing how you treat everyone with the same respect, whether they're a station janitor or a deadly predator. Captain, seeing how you choose compassion, even when it's harder than indifference. I've spent 6 months falling for you, Marcus Chen, and I don't want to hide it anymore. I don't want to be like the cubs with their tails sticking out, pretending I'm concealed when I'm completely visible." The universe condensed to the space between them, to ocean-colored eyes, and the sound of his heartbeat loud in his ears. "I'm not good at this," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm a biologist who accidentally became a diplomat. I don't have smooth words or confident moves. But Lyra, you're the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing before I sleep. You make me want to be braver than I am. You make the universe feel less overwhelming. You make—" He stopped, swallowed, took the leap. "You make me believe in something beyond survival, in actual happiness, in home, even when we're floating in a station between the stars." Lyra's smile was sunrise after a long night. "Those are pretty smooth words for someone who claims not to have them," she said, and then she closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question and answer all at once. Her lips tasted like the strange fruit from her home world that she'd shared with him weeks ago, sweet and slightly electric. When they pulled apart, Marcus was breathing hard, his hands somehow having found their way to her face, cradling her jaw with trembling fingers. "I have no idea how this works," he admitted. "Our species, the regulations, the distance if either of us gets reassigned. Neither do I," Lyra said, her forehead resting against his. "But I know hiding doesn't work. The cubs taught us that. Their tails stuck out. They were visible and vulnerable, and it saved them because you saw and chose to protect rather than exploit. So I'm choosing to be visible, Marcus. To let my feelings show and trust that you'll protect them," Marcus finished. "Treasure them. Protect you. Always." They sat in the observation deck until the station's artificial night cycle shifted toward morning, talking and planning, and sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. 2 people from different worlds, choosing connection despite the complications, choosing to let their metaphorical tails stick out, visible and vulnerable and trusting. 3 months later, Marcus received a message on the long-range comm. His datapad lit up with a Vraken transmission code, and when he opened it, the screen filled with 3 familiar faces. "Marcus." Toth's voice was tinny through the speakers, but unmistakably excited. "Look, I lost a tooth. Father says it means I'm growing fierce." The cub displayed a gap in his developing fangs with obvious pride. Mira pushed into frame. "We're coming back. For the treaty signing. Father says we can stay with you again if you're not too busy with important human things. You're the important thing." Krez's voice came from off-screen. And then the oldest cub's face appeared, more grown than Marcus remembered from just 3 months. "Father says you and the Seraphim female are bonded now." "That's good." She's pack too. Smart pack. Captain Drevik's amused voice rumbled in the background. Let the human respond, my fierce ones. You've given him no space to speak. The cubs reluctantly pulled back, and Drevik's scarred face filled the screen. Marcus Chen, my offspring demand your presence. The treaty negotiations are scheduled for next month on Frontier's Hope. If your duties allow, we would be honored to have you as cultural liaison for the Vraken delegation. Official position, official pay, and yes, the cubs will be present. I'm told they require Uncle Marcus for proper behavior. Marcus laughed, the sound startling from his chest, full of joy and disbelief. Uncle Marcus? I've been promoted from babysitter to family? You stood between them and harm, Drevik said, his tone serious now. You are family, Marcus. More than that, you are the reason this treaty exists. Your actions showed both our peoples what cooperation looks like, what honor looks like across species lines. Come, help us build this peace. Help my cubs continue to heal. And bring the Seraphim. She is pack also. Lyra appeared in the doorway of Marcus's quarters, her silver hair catching the light, a knowing smile on her face. I got the same message, she said. The Seraphim Council wants me there as an observer. Apparently, we've become a case study in successful cross-species cooperation. There's a proposal to assign us as a permanent team for first contact situations. Marcus stood, crossed to her, took her hands in his. The gesture had become natural over months of learning each other's languages, spoken and unspoken. A permanent team, he repeated. Together, officially, together, Lyra confirmed. If you want that, I know it's fast. I know there are complications. But Marcus, when I think about my future, about what I want to build and who I want to build it with, it's you. Marcus interrupted, the certainty settling into his bones like truth. Whatever comes, whoever we meet, whichever crisis needs mediating or cubs need watching or impossible situations need navigating, I want to do it with you. That's the clearest thought I've had about anything in my entire life. Lyra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, happy ones. Then we accept. Both assignments. We go together. We build this together. And maybe along the way, we figure out what our own happy ending looks like. Not an ending, Marcus corrected softly, echoing Captain Drevik's words. A beginning. They sealed it with a kiss, tender and full of promise. Two beings from different worlds choosing each other across all the space and strangeness between them. The treaty signing 4 weeks later was a massive diplomatic event. Representatives from dozens of species gathered on Frontier's Hope. Marcus stood in his official capacity as Vraken cultural liaison. Lyra beside him as Seraphim observer, and together they watched history being written. Captain Drevik signed for the Vraken coalition, his clawed hand steady on the digital document. The human ambassadors signed for Earth and her colonies. Others followed, each signature a thread in a web of connection that would bind the sector in cooperation rather than conflict. But for Marcus, the most important moment came after the ceremonies, when 3 cubs tackled him in the corridor outside the conference hall, striped tails wagging with joy. That was completely undiplomatic and utterly perfect. Uncle Marcus, they chorused, and he went down under their affectionate assault, laughing, his heart full of a feeling that transcended species and language. This, he thought, arms full of predator cubs who trusted him absolutely. This is what we're building. Not just treaties and trade agreements, but actual bonds, actual family across the stars. Lyra helped pull him to his feet, the cubs circling them both, now, chattering about their ship journey and the new things they'd learned. And did Marcus know that Kresh had won her first practice? Combat trial and Mira had started studying xenobiology because of him, and Toth could count to 105 different languages. Now, they were growing, changing, becoming themselves with the resilience of the young, carrying their grief and their mother's memory, but not being crushed by it. Drevik approached, his expression warm in the way Marcus had learned to read. They have not stopped speaking of you since the message call, the captain said. I am considering whether gratitude or exasperation is more appropriate. Gratitude, Marcus suggested. Definitely gratitude. I'm a very good influence. The captain's laugh was like rocks tumbling down a mountain, rough and genuine. You are an unusual human, Marcus Chen. But then, unusual is what this new age requires. The old ways, he gestured broadly, they served us, made us strong, but they also made us isolated, rigid. My mate's death taught me that strength without connection is just survival, not living. You and the seraphim, you show living. His eyes found Lyra, assessed her with a soldier's attention to detail, and apparently found her worthy because he inclined his head in respect. Treat him well, Lyra of the seraphim. He has a soft heart, which makes him dangerous in the best way. Lyra's smile was radiant. I intend to spend a very long time doing exactly that. Captain, the cubs demanded a tour of the station, which turned into an impromptu educational session when they discovered the hydroponics bay and Marcus's earth plants. They were fascinated by Venus flytraps, seeing kinship perhaps with another predatory species, even one that was vegetable. Marcus explained photosynthesis and evolution and adaptation, slipping into teacher mode without thinking. Lyra watched him with those ocean eyes, her expression soft and proud, and Marcus felt seen in a way that still took his breath. This was his life, now. This strange, wonderful, impossible life, mediating between species, raising cubs that weren't his by blood, but were his by choice, loving a woman whose people measured time differently than humans, but who somehow synced perfectly with his heartbeat, building peace one connection at a time, one moment of choosing understanding over fear. That night, after the cubs were settled in their guest quarters and the station had quieted into sleep cycle, Marcus and Lyra returned to the observation deck. Their spot, their tradition. Do you ever think about how weird this all is? Marcus asked, Lyra tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. A year ago, I was cataloging microbes and avoiding social interaction. Now I'm Uncle Marcus to apex predator cubs and in love with the most brilliant person I've ever met, and apparently building a career out of being a bridge between species. Weird, Lyra mused, but also right, don't you think? Like all the strange pieces of our lives, were puzzle parts that only made sense when they came together. She tilted her head to look up at him, her face luminous in the starlight. I was so scared when I came here, felt so inadequate. Then you found me crying in the hydroponics bay and saw me as a person, not a position. That changed everything, Marcus. You changed everything. We changed it together, Marcus corrected. You saw me too, Lyra. Recommended me for the cubs when I was drowning in shipping disputes and self-doubt. Trusted me with something important. Believed in me before I believed in myself. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, breathing in her electric rain scent. We're good at this. The together thing. Building something new from all our weird puzzle pieces. Good at it, Lyra agreed. And getting better. Marcus Chen, human xenobiologist, accidental diplomat, honorary Vracan uncle, and the person who holds my heart. What do you want from this strange life we're building? Marcus thought about 3 striped tails sticking out from behind crates. About cubs who forgot to hide them because they were too focused on trust. About all the things that made them visible and vulnerable, but also saved them, connected them, made them real. I want more moments like that one in the cargo bay, he said slowly, working through the thought. Not the danger, but the choice. The moment when I decided that protecting those cubs mattered more than protecting myself. When you decided to stay with me instead of taking the safe option. I want a life full of those choices, Lyra. Choosing connection over safety. Choosing people over protocol. Choosing love, even when it's complicated and cross-species and has no instruction manual. Lyra was quiet for a moment, then she shifted, turning in his arms to face him fully. Then let me choose right now, she said, her voice steady and sure. Marcus Chen, I choose you. Not just for now, not just for this assignment. I choose you for all the messy, complicated, beautiful future we can build. I choose you for the quiet moments and the crisis moments. For the days when we're mediating treaties and the days when we're just existing together in the dark, watching stars. I choose you, and I want you to choose me the same way, permanently, fully, with all the legal and cultural complications that entails. Marcus's heart stopped, restarted, tried to beat its way out of his chest. Lyra, are you asking me to bond with me, she said, using the seraphim word that meant more than marriage, deeper than partnership. Be my person as I'm yours. Figure out the legal framework and the cultural translations and all the logistics later. But decide now, with me, that this is real and permanent and worth whatever challenges come. There was no hesitation in Marcus's heart. No doubt, just absolute crystalline certainty. Yes, he said, the word coming out rough with emotion. Yes, Lyra, I choose you. I bond with you. I want to build everything with you, now and permanently and across whatever space and time we get. They kissed under the stars, sealing promises that cross species and traditions. Two people writing their own story in a universe that was learning cooperation one connection at a time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, both smiling like the universe had just rearranged itself into something more beautiful, Marcus laughed. We should probably tell someone. I think there are forms. Definitely forms. Possibly councils to consult and cultural liaisons till he stopped. Wait, we are the cultural liaisons. We are, Lyra agreed, her smile wicked and delighted. Which means we get to help write the framework for this. First official human-seraphim bonding. We're making history, Marcus. Again, Marcus added. We're making history again. We really need to stop doing that. It's exhausting. But he was smiling, and Lyra was laughing. And somewhere in the guest quarters, 3 cubs slept safely, their striped tails twitching with dreams of play and protection. And Marcus thought that exhausting was a small price for this kind of joy. The next morning brought meetings and planning and the beginning of something new. Captain Drevik, when informed of the bonding decision, gave his formal approval with what Marcus was reasonably sure was pride. You choose well, human. And you, Seraphim, you have selected a male of quality. May your bond be fierce and your offspring numerous. Marcus choked on his morning beverage at the offspring comment, but Lyra just smiled serenely and thanked the captain. The cubs were even more enthusiastic, immediately declaring that any offspring would need them as protectors and teachers, which led to a complicated discussion about biology and species compatibility and possibly adoption that Marcus was not prepared to have before his second coffee. But it was perfect. Chaotic and strange and perfect. This was his life, his family assembled from different species and circumstances and choices. His love who glowed in the dark and challenged him to be braver. His purpose, building bridges and peace and understanding one moment at a time. That evening, Marcus found himself back in the cargo bay, where everything had changed. The spot where 3 cubs had hidden, tails sticking out, completely visible in their vulnerability. The place where he'd chosen to stand between them and harm, starting a cascade that changed everything. Lyra found him there, slipping her hand into his with the ease of someone who belonged there. Thinking again? She asked gently. Remembering, Marcus corrected. That moment when I saw those tails sticking out, they were trying so hard to hide, and they'd forgotten the most obvious thing. They were completely exposed. And I thought he paused, gathering the thought. I thought that's all of us, isn't it? We try to hide our vulnerable parts, our fears and hopes and the things that could hurt us if someone wanted to cause harm. But those are the parts that connect us. The cubs' tails gave them away, but they also showed me they were scared and needed help. If they'd been perfect at hiding, I might never have understood how much they needed protection. Lyra nodded, understanding, as she always did. We're all walking around with our tails sticking out, she said softly, trying to be professional or strong or put together, but our hearts are right there, visible to anyone who looks. I think the bravest thing we do is acknowledge that. Choose to be seen anyway. Trust that the right people will protect those vulnerable parts instead of exploiting them. You see mine, Marcus said, turning to face her fully. All the parts I'm not good at hiding. The self-doubt and the awkwardness and the way I care too much about everyone. You see it all. And you stay. I stay, Lyra confirmed. And you see mine. The fear that I'm not enough. The homesickness. The way I try so hard to be perfect because I'm terrified of failing. You see. All of it. And you love me anyway. Not anyway, Marcus corrected firmly. Not despite those things. Because of them. Because you're real and trying and brave enough to let me see the truth of you. That's not a flaw to overlook, Lyra. That's everything I love. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Marcus thought about tails sticking out from behind crates. About all the ways vulnerability could become strength when met with protection instead of harm. About building a universe where being seen wasn't dangerous, but sacred. They'd learned it from cubs who forgot to hide their tails. And maybe that was the perfect lesson for building something new. Not perfect concealment, but brave visibility. Not isolation, but connection. Not hiding the parts that made them vulnerable, but trusting the right people to treasure those parts instead of breaking them. This was the future they were building, one moment at a time, one choice at a time. One brave decision to let their tails stick out and trust that they'd be met with protection, with love, with understanding. And Marcus, standing in a cargo bay with the woman he loved and the memory of 3 cubs who'd trusted him completely, thought that maybe, just maybe, they were going to change the universe after all.